Hello, BookTube. It's Monday late afternoon here in the UK. I'm a bit late with this video. I had hoped to do it last night, but I didn't get around to it. It's the final quarter of Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited, and I sort of joined in with uh, Matthew at Maybury Book Club and Steve Donahue in their read-along. Um, to do this, and this was the third reading of this, and I thoroughly enjoyed it again, as I always do. And yeah, it's we left off, excuse me, with Charles Ryder sort of coming back from his sort of couple years in Mesoamerica, Latin America, painting pictures and doing well, and meeting Julia Flight, or Julia, I forget his name now that she married Rex. And they met on a boat, and they started an affair that continued, and we sort of picked them up again, that they were living basically together at Brideshead Castle, and they are sort of deeply in love, and they are waiting for their both divorces so they could marry. And Charles gets his divorce first in the spring, and Julia's waiting to get hers from Rex in the autumn. In the meantime, sort of, as I say, they're living there. There's gossip and everything, because they know, and even Rex is aware that they're, and he's not concerned at all, really, too much. He just didn't want to fuss. He didn't want publicity about it. And there is Brideshead, though, is Bridie is going to get married, and the woman he's going to marry is older than him, and has two children, and they're sitting around with Charles and Julia, and they ask him, "So how did he meet her?" And well, we find out that Bridie has a collecting passion. It is matchboxes that he collects, and he met this guy and his wife, but he has died, so he's gonna he sort of, I guess, fell in love with his widow, and they're gonna marry. And the joke was, well, you're marrying her for his matchbox collection. And he's saying, no, well, that was donated to some museum or somewhere, so he doesn't get it. He doesn't get the collection. But he wants to bring his new bride to be, to come to Brideshead, but he doesn't want Julia and Charles there, because they're living in sin, and she won't accept that. So, and that just, Julia's very distraught by this, and she sort of realizes, and that she is living in sin, according to Christian dogma, and especially the Roman Catholic Church. So there's there's little things that are happening there, but as well, at some point, Lord Marchmain comes back to Brideshead, and he comes back to die. And it's a bit of a lingering through the spring, and our late our winter and spring, and he is watched over, and all the family come. Cordelia comes back. Well, Sebastian's out there. Cordelia has come back from the Spanish Civil War, where she helped out doing nursing / I guess ambulance driving, and she actually found or went to Morocco and found Sebastian, who's been living at a monastery. And he's not in very good shape. He's quite ill. He had wanted to become a monk. They rejected him, but he kept coming back, and he was quite ill at some point. So they're allowing him to live there as being a porter. And she tells Charles all the details of this and how the German that he was living with sort of got exported back to Germany and was put in the army, but then once, and then I think he tried to escape, and then he was put into a concentration camp, and then um, um, Sebastian sort of looked for him in Germany and tried to find him, but then he found out that he had actually committed suicide, hanged himself shortly after he went into one of the concentration camps. So that's really, was a blow to Sebastian. So that's where he went back to Morocco, and that's where we sort of last see him with in the story from Cordelia, who sort of thinks how he's going to die. He's just going to sort of linger on there, continually drink, and just eventually just die. Um, either in short term or longer term. So that's where we sort of leave Sebastian. He's gone from the story basically. So we're back with Cordelia, Julia, Bridie, and Charles, Lord Marchmain with his whole Italian household, and Cara, his mistress, are there, and he's just waiting to die. And the family basically wants him to have his last rites. And they ask the priest to come, but he's pushed out of the room. He's saying no, get lost. He basically gives them the finger, and but then he gets really sort of ill, and he's just on his last legs, last moments of life. And Charles is just couldn't believe. He just doesn't think they should do this, like taking advantage of him and everything. But they do, they do, and they send the priest in, and he gives them his last rites, and Lord Marchmain sort of does his signs of the cross, and dies. And at that point, Julia basically cuts it with Charles. I think as I said in I think the second or maybe the first video that I did of this, I think it might have been the second actually, where religion is a huge thing with this, and it's like the whole family has been on a guilt trip because of sin, basically, and Julia, who sort of thought she was away from it, but it's really really laid her low, and she she doesn't want like she feels that she has sinned. And I think too is like she saw her father die, who left the church, and how he died, and he's sort of friendless in many ways and away from the church. And I think she doesn't want to be like that, nor does she want sort of the rift between, if she goes back to uh, Roman Catholicism, and Charles probably wouldn't. They could be a rift like her mother and her father had. That's not said, but I think that's sort of implied while she's seeing all this and seeing him die. So basically, that's sort of we left him, and he leaves, and then it's a few years later. It's we're back to sort of where the book began, where Charles is in the army, the Second World War, and they've been billeted at Brideshead, and he. He obviously recognizes the place, and that's where it brings back all the memories. he goes. The Nanny Hawkins is still living there. Julia is in charge. She owns the place because her father left the estate to her, and the castle to her, because he does not like Bridie's choice of a wife. Can't stand her. So he's left everything to Julia. And I guess there could be, like, she knew this before he died, and before she, said no, basically gave Charles his walking papers at the time. And I kind of wonder, is, like, because now she's totally independent. She's the queen of the castle. There could be something like that in there, because it's not beyond, I don't think, her character to do that, but it's obviously not explicit. But anyway, Charles learns after speaking to Nanny Hawkins that Cordelia and Julia are in Europe, doing nursing work in in uh, in the war. And the place is sort of a wreck. It's filthy. It's been sort of run down, and he sort of, and again, he's back to where the beginning, where he's sort of distraught and everything. um, and he says, he's talking to his sort of second, more or less, one of his lieutenants, um, and he talks about that. Like, he's talking about the building, and like, it's not being used now for what it was built for. And he says, and I'll quote a few things just to end up here. And he says no. He said that not what it was built for. Perhaps that's one of the pleasures of building, like having a son, wondering how he'll grow up. I don't know. I never built anything, and I forfeited the right to watch my son grow up. I'm homeless, childless, middle-aged, loveless, and that's the state of mind that Charles is at this point. But then he sort of, he comes to realization that, like, through the architecture of the building and stuff like that, it says the builders do not know the uses to which their work would descend. They made a new house with the stones of the old castle, year by year, generation after generation. They enriched and extended it. Year by year, the great harvest of timber in the park grew to ripeness, until, in sudden frost, came the age of Hooper. And that's the army, basically, he's talking about. The place was desolate, and the work all brought to nothing. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Uh, and then he goes, but this is something, and then he sort of ends, like, this is where the sort of story ends. Uh, Something quite remote from anything the builders intended has come out of their work, and out of the fierce little human tragedy in which I played, something none of us thought about at the time: a small red flame, a beaten copper lamp of deplorable design, relit before the beaten copper doors of the tabernacle, the flame which the old knights saw from their tombs, which they saw put out. The flame burns again for for other soldiers, far from home, farther in heart than Acre or Jerusalem. It could it could not have been lit but for the builders and the tragedians, and there I found in this morning, burning anew among the old stones. And then he sort of, he goes into his room, and somebody says to him, the second in command says, "You're looking unusually cheerful today." So Charles starts the story, and with, regret about his life, that he has nothing. Everything that he's done um, has come has basically come to nothing. And he's distant from his children. uh, doesn't have a wife, doesn't have anything like that. His career as a painter is sort of at least on hold, if not over at the moment. And but then, by seeing Brideshead Castle again, he remembers sort of the good times and the bad times. And I think he sort of realizes at the end that there's new purpose, so he can come out of this possibly with something different, because the building has it's been repurposed. So it sort of ends on a sort of a optimistic note of building with what you got, and changing what you have. Um, and as Steve said in his video, Steve Donahue, that we don't know what's going to happen after this, because it sounds like he still is. He's estranged from Julia, but it's been a few years. But he was many years estranged from the family and Julia, and he met her again on the boat. So this is not sort of the end of the story, and there's been no sequel written about this, but it sort of could turn out back. He could be back after the war. With Julia. Who knows? It's sort of the unknown part here. But because there've been the changes throughout the story, it's not impossible for that to happen, and it doesn't necessarily mean Sebastian's going to die the way Cordelia says she thinks how he will die. Things could change. But yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite novels. And I started watching last night as well. I watched the first episode of the 1981 TV series with Jeremy Irons, Diana Quick, and Anthony Andrews. And it was adapted by John Mortimer, who created Rumpel, and it's fabulous. I'm not a big fan of Jeremy Irons. This was, I think, probably the first thing I saw him in, and I loved it. I thought he was fabulous. The narration that he does is wonderful throughout, and it evokes a lot of Evelyn Waugh, because it is word for word at times through from the book. It's a very, very close rendering to the book, I think it is, and it's just wonderful. It's 11 parts, so it's at least 11 or more hours, I think it is, because the first part was I think it was meant to be a 2 hour, but it's an hour and 40 minutes without any interruptions, commercials. But yeah, I've enjoyed reading this again, and I'm definitely going to reread it again. This is something that I will reread probably every few years now, I think. Because I think I can, in some ways, I can appreciate it more. Not only being older, but also, knowing the story and seeing other little things in it that are fun to sort of discover on every reading. And yeah, so I whoever's follow along with it, I know a lot of people have found it a bit confusing, but to me, it's one of the best things written in the 20th century in English. And I do urge you, if you haven't read it, to at least give it a try, and sort of keep an open mind, and go with the story. It's a wonderful story, I think, as well as just beautifully written. So anyway, that's the end. I won't be doing anything more, I don't think, on Brideshead, unless I do something a little bit about the series once I'm finished. But I'm going to watch that slowly. I think about a part every night, so it's going to take me a couple weeks to get through it. Yeah, and I'm just reading other things. And I'd love to hear what you thought of this if you read along with it, um, and or if you hope to read it at some point. There has been some spoilers throughout this, so I do apologize for the people that don't like knowing what's happening. But even so, it's worth a read, even if you know and you've heard the spoilers. Anyway, take care, BookTube, and I will see you next time. Bye.